Good morning. In this presentation, I want to illustrate some two best practice examples that were inaugurated earlier on this year. All along during the various meetings held with EWT, there was always an issue of using those dead spaces, disused spaces between the walls, and as a result of the configurations of the walls themselves. And we always tried to find good use to such spaces. These are two examples from Malta. The first one revolves around the old city of Mdina. These are the ramparts of the old city. And this project concerned the reutilization of the space between the two sets of walls outlined and colored in red. Previously, we're going to see some pictures. Previously, the space had an old football ground, some tennis courts which were not used, and a well-developed orange grove, but most of it was out of bounds of the general public. So you just basically cross the bridge, have view across the space, but you know that you cannot access it. So some historical background of the walls themselves. Obviously, Mdina started off in, as the word recalls, it comes from Medina. It was of Arab origin in the year 800 BC. The first introduction of the walls as we see them today was in the 15th century, in the medieval times, and subsequent to the arrival of the Knights of St. John. Although the Mdina was bigger during Arab times, it was reduced drastically later on. But then when the Knights of St. John came over in the 16th century, in the early part of the 16th century, it remained basically as it is, as you see it today. The shape was established by, in accordance with the plans submitted by the French engineer Charles François de Mondion in the 18th century. He widened the ditch to construct, to have the space between the counterscarp, and we get most of the features that you get in other walled cities, where the countermines, the covered way, and the glacis. Originally, of course, it was barren ground purposely to have full visibility of the enemy, and especially free from landscaping, because would be a problem in such times. The project itself the three main objectives, shall we say, was the removal of the visual obstructions, so that you free up the vista between the walls and the open space to increase the legibility of the walls themselves. The removal subsequent to that, the pitch and the tennis court had to be removed, and the reorganization of the landscaping. So although the citrus trees were pruned and moved to one side to improve the visibility of the walls, but they remained actually on site. Obviously, this helped to establish the full potential and the full appreciation of the architectural value of the bastions themselves. And one can see better the relationships between the different parts of the ramparts vis-a-vis the rest of the citadel. Some photos, they're not particularly good. That's the old football pitch. These are the pathways along the citrus and olive groves, parts of the football pitch over here. This is the bridge to cross from the Rabat to Medina, the old tennis courts. This is the space all along we're talking about here. Once again, the bridge leading to Medina and parts of the walls over here. So the actual works, like I said, consisted of the replanting of the citrus trees on one side of the bastion walls, so that the walls, the actual ramparts of Medina could be better appreciated, and to have one continuous pathway along the ditch, and then increase access points from the other town of Rabat through the use of lifts and ramps, so that this space could be actually used by the general public. These are the plans that were submitted for the project itself. This was the creation of the green open space. These are the trees which were reorganized on this side of the wall, so that the wall of Medina itself, the bastions, could be better, and the sheer height of it could be better appreciated. And this is the main access to one of the gates leading to Medina. Along over here, this is on the Rabat side, this is another town over here. There were various points, access points, through lifts, so that one could go down and use the ditch itself. These are the sectional drawings. This is the upper level on the Rabat side, and this is ground level of the ditch itself. The lifts providing access and the ramps. Another section. This is a plan showing the ramps and the use of hard stone paving. This is one side of the ditch, where at one end of the whole project there is an existing restaurant, and next to it there is access even to the ground level of the ditch itself, and you can see how the height over like some 3 stories height of the bastion walls can be appreciated vis-a-vis the distance. Now this is the end result of the project. These pictures were taken at the beginning of the year, so you can see that the trees were heavily pruned, so now they tend to give a different perspective altogether. Pathways with hard stone paving and the open space, and you can see that the bastions themselves have come to life again. You can actually appreciate the bastions better. The bastions themselves were restored as part of another EU project which concentrated on the restoration of bastions in Medina, in Rabat, in Gozo, and in the capital city of Valletta, and in Vittoriosa itself. more vistas from higher ground in Rabat. Sorry, you can see this the lawn which delineates the open space from the vegetation over here, and that's the main entrance of the city gate. Another vista over here. Okay, move on to the next project, and this revolves around the Fortification Interpretation Center in the capital city of Valletta. I'll start off this part by citing Professor Hughes' quote: "Malta's fortifications represent one of the finest collections of military architecture to be found anywhere in the world and constitute a monumental heritage for the sheer concentration of majesty which is quite unmatched." This is why we felt the need to have a proper interpretation center of the fortifications for the whole island. The project utilized an old building which was previously a magazine depot during the Knights of St. John. Then it was subsequently reutilized by the British, and later on it used to function even as an examination center. In fact, I did some of my exams, some of my GCEs over there, because there are big halls which lend themselves to such gatherings, really. This is just to put you in the picture. Valletta is along this route over here. We've got Slema on one side and the three cities on the other side. So it faces what we call Marsamxetto Harbour. And this is St. Andrew's Bastion over here. This is the building itself before restoration works commenced. You can see its state, and more importantly, the top floor had been damaged during the Second World War, and it remained like that subsequent to that. These are the plans. They concerned the reutilization of around 1,200 rather square meters of space. The restoration of the lower floors and the reconstruction of the upper floor, which has access from another street above. And the lower floor over here, leading to Marsamxett Harbour, is even accessed through a flight of steps on the left. You can visualize this, the halls, which really lend themselves to an interpretation center, to a museum. Just to understand and put to context Professor Hughes of the sheer quantity of walls concentrated in such a small island, you can see the quantity of forts and walls constructed during the nights. Later on, more were added during the British period. So this gives you that final number. We've got over 60 kilometers of ramparts, and that's a lot, and puts a strain on government to maintain these walls. Why do we have such amount of walls? Obviously, it started off because of the geography itself. We're strategically located in the middle of the Mediterranean. Then the Knights came along in the 16th century, and they really initiated a building spree for the next 2 centuries. Finally, in the 1800s, the British came over, and they recognized the benefits of the Grand Harbour, especially, which was big enough to accommodate the ships of the Royal Navy. The plans and the whole project were co-financed by the European Regional Development Fund, and they totaled 36 million. And like I said before, besides Valletta, Birgu, Mdina, and Cittadella and Gozo benefited from such funds. To date, over 6 kilometers of walls have been restored. What did the project try to achieve? Obviously, to try to explain the history and interpret the architecture of the fortifications. It's a cross between a museum, an information center, and acts as a research center. In fact, there is even a library as well. It has the traditional displays that we used to be accustomed to in museums, but also makes use of multimedia technology to have that interactive education experience, especially geared for the younger generation. A more important thing is how to explain really the complexity of such essentially what are essentially war machines, and the variety of them all, and to put it into a perspective why they were built, why they were needed at that particular time, and as we saw this morning, it's to reuse it rather than just waiting for it to be degraded further. Unless such assets are used, obviously they will fall into disrepair, and the people themselves won't recognize the value of such assets. The features of the building was a 16th century warehouse, which was essentially a bomb-proof magazine. The space is 1,200 square meters, and it's centrally located in Valletta, next to Marsamxed Gate, so it is easily accessible even by boat from the other side of Marsamxed Harbour. It's got beautiful views across the harbour of the restored, especially Fort Manuel, which was restored privately some time ago. Cutting off. And Fortin, and we tried to have a design which is sustainable by introduction of PV panels on the roof, limited use of ACs, and especially use natural ventilation. And to close off, these are some pictures of the restored center. We have showing the architecture itself of the warehouse and use of scale models to illustrate. And this is what it looks like from outside. That's it. Thank you.